Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
In the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, sales motivator Blake tells the sales team to ABC, always be closing. It's close or hit the bricks. And he represents what many people envision when they think of salespeople. But in his own belligerent way, he's correct. At some point, we need to close the deal, to get the contract signed, to get the check. But is there a way to do so without being such an unmitigated jerk? Well, pull out that set of steak knives you won at the last sales contest as Scott and I discuss the secrets of closing the sale and other innovative ideas on episode 558 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
What a great movie. I think that was released in the mid-'80s. It's the only movie that I can remember where there are no women. There was not one female.
I have nothing to say about that.
Okay. Playing it safe. Well, this is our anniversary issue, isn't it?
Yeah, 3 full years. That's our third anniversary, right? Not
third, yeah.
Non-stop.
Non-stop. Never missed.
And never a dull moment.
And I think I did one without you, if I remember right.
I could be.
I interviewed Anthony Anarino, I think.
Yep.
Was
and then I probably did one without you sometimes.
You did one with Peter. You brought Peter Beaumont in.
Yep.
And replaced me when I was not available. So
what have you learned in 3 years working together here?
Well, I learned that this has really helped me stay committed and not getting sticky. I think if you're not working, and COVID definitely caused a slowdown in my business, and doing the podcast prevented me from getting sticky and forgetting stuff. And when I always had to prepare and always had to be prepping for the show, it really kept me in the game.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of like doing a presentation every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about the topic and what we're going to talk about, and it's really forced me to continue learning. And I know you and I talk about that a lot. That sometimes people, they start their career and they stop their learning. And I guess we're speaking to the choir a little bit when we talk to our listeners, because they're the ones that have made the decisions to continue learning.
Right.
But I would have to tell you, listeners, don't just take the easy way out, not get the books that we're reading. Just listen to us babble on about them, because you're going to learn a lot more if you read the whole book than just listen to Scott and I. So keep learning. That's one thing I would say.
Another thing, I think the key word, with the podcast and prepping and preparing is to be relevant. The market is constantly changing, and I'm grateful for our listeners that are committed to being relevant in the marketplace, to constantly be working on their presentation and influence skills to bring prospects to a better life, to a better results.
Yeah, certainly my material. Certainly it's forced me to make my material better. And the questions we get from the audience, a question we get from our listeners, I love those, because they make me really think about outside the box of kind of the perfect situation. None of us live or work in a perfect business situation. We have knuckleheaded clients, and sometimes bosses that are like Blake from Glengarry Glen Ross, if you've seen the movie, and they're not really, we're not really moving forward. We're not really in a pleasant atmosphere always. And so the podcast made me think about some of those things. Yeah. And it's also helped me develop a better friendship with the professor here.
Oh, thank you.
On the other side of the microphone. Fortunately, we don't sit next to each other. We do this remotely, but so we don't ever come to blows.
I always say, Bill makes me want to be a better man in my sales skills. And that's right out of the movie. Which movie is it, everyone? As Good as It Gets. That's right. With Jack Nicholson.
And see, I would say Scott makes me want to be a better person.
Okay. Well, you got to quote
to be non-gender specific.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into our book club. So Thank you all. Thanks for listening. For those of you who've listened for 3 years, we have fun doing this, and hopefully it shows. But we can't spend our whole show reminiscing. So let's get into chapter 8 of what great salespeople do.
On empathic listening. And,
empathic. Emphatic is like emphatic, but with the wrong letter.
That's right. Empathic. Okay. Storytelling is what we're really talking about. Begins with listening, and empathic listening is being empathetic. Is the strongest skill, I think, of being a successful salesperson, because you need to see it from the other person's perspective, and it is a goal or a problem that they want to solve or achieve or get on the other side of. And we all know that people buy emotionally and they justify it intellectually, which is why understanding emotions and empathy is critical to an influential conversation. And real listening, empathic listening, empathic, empathic listening.
I wasn't gonna correct you again.
I know. I just stuck. I finally remembered how to say quinoa, even though when you look at it, it's like, what? No, it's quinoa. So empathic listening involves support, encouragement, a serious curiosity, patience, and caring. And I take the Strength Finders test. I have empathy as a strength. I don't think it's a strength. I think it's a liability. And I say that because I can be very empathetic working with a salesperson that is struggling to grow, struggling to change, struggling to get out of the rut. And every reason that they give me, or an excuse, one or the other, I can relate to it because I've been through it too. But
one of the things that I find, and I teach this in my classes, is there's a strong difference between sympathetic and empathetic. Mm-hmm. Empathetic means I understand what you're going through. Sympathy means I agree with what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And we need to be empathetic, and that we can understand how they can go through that. But we're not going to let them stay there. We're not going to let them wallow in the mire of whatever their problem is. That's the choice of salespeople, is to help them get out of that using our products or services.
And it's really the foundation of a reciprocal relationship. The better listener we become, the better storyteller we become. And I think that's why the authors are really incorporating that into this book, is to be a storyteller, you need to be a good listener, and you really need to be active listening or empathic listening.
Well, and I think you're going to go through the blocks, and I do think we're not as good a listener as we think we are.
Right.
And I bet the evidence is how many people do you meet who tell you their name and you've forgotten it as soon as they've said it?
Part of that is I learn visually. If I see their name and if I've seen their business card, the next time I see them, I remember their name.
Right. That helps. But I do think that if we're not listening, it's because we're thinking, okay, I'm going to tell them my name, or I'm thinking of something else, or can I pronounce my own name right? And we're so focused on us, we don't focus on them.
Right. Yeah. And it's sometimes how we learn, but it takes a lot of work to remember somebody's name, especially if you go to a networking event and you meet 10 people. You're supposed to follow up with them the next day. It's like, if you don't have business cards, it's going to be very tough to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And business cards are, on the decline. A lot of people don't carry business cards. I'm one that I should have more business cards when I'm out and about, and I don't. And I need to get in the game on doing that.
All right.
But some of the blocks that are really holding us back, we think about rehearsing what we're going to say next, which is very common. We listen and we want to think about how we're going to respond, which is very normal. We're judging the speaker and their statements, and all of this is in the book. So I'm taking this right out of the book. So we're judging the speaker and their statements. We're placating the speaker, and I'm not sure really how to do that. What does placate mean?
To make them feel better, to again, kind of empathize with them, flattery maybe.
Yeah. Sparring with the speaker and getting into a debate, which can be very common these days. And sometimes we just avoid those topics altogether and those people altogether. Mind reading is very common. I think salespeople can be very, very assumptive when they're working with prospects and thinking that everybody has a problem and everybody wants to buy their solution and everybody wants to change, which is
I think what happens in that, maybe what you say it happens a lot, that they assume too much, but I do think that they see something similar. This mind reading is, we see something similar to what we've seen before, and we extrapolate out an endpoint. And just because the beginning of what they say is similar to something doesn't mean it's going to end up that way. And then we jump in and we say, "Oh, I know what you're going to say, Scott. I know where you're going to go with this." And even if we're right, we're being rude.
Right.
And then daydreaming, you mentioned also, which I think a friend of mine called it skip listening. And
Oh,
that
good.
is we listen and then something catches our attention. And then like when we're on the computer, it takes us this way and that way and that way. And all of a sudden we're on the beaches of Bali
No,
and the speaker's still talking. We're like, oh, how did I get here? And we got to force ourselves back to listen again because our mind just took us 5 steps down the road in a nanosecond.
right. I think there's a commercial on TV right now where a guy's getting a train ticket station and the guy's talking about a girl that he met and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe it's a Corona commercial. I can't remember. Advising the speaker. So now you want to be able to share how much you know. Men love to do this. It's the one-upmanship. It's like, well, you didn't really complete it. Here's what you left out. And they advise the speaker on stuff that was missing. They get a little bit too detailing in the conversation, so we get into really unnecessary clarification, which is very common from again men to do that, and then insisting on being right. And it's like, I think this is in the book, Dr. Phil. Do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And sometimes you have to be able to compromise a little bit.
Well, Scott, you're neither.
I'm not.
You're neither right nor married.
It's true.
And I'm married, so I know I'm never right.
Right.
So that's good. Maybe if you're not married, you get to be right. My wife doesn't listen to this. She's heard that before.
Yeah.
The joke she's not used to. So yeah, I think they're really right that we don't focus on listening. And I would encourage our listeners to go back to episode 539. We had Manny Style on, and he talked about listening, and he's actually going to be on our PSA group this Friday, which will be April 7th. So I don't know if we'll get this out before then, but you can sign up for that and go to that PSA, psamn.org. Yeah, we blunder in our own way. And you and I even do that when we're talking here. We step on each
sometimes.
other, so.
I wasn't really following along on that, Bill, but I'm sure it was important. So when we're selling,
well, you were thinking about what you wanted to say.
I was getting on to the next, notes here. But Neil Rackham, we all heard Neil Rackham, Spin Selling, the author of Spin Selling, which is a book that has never gone into soft cover. It's always been a hardcover book. This is a great line, and it's so true. When you're selling, your expertise becomes your enemy. Your expertise may make you right, but your buyer still needs to move through his or her buy cycle. And people love to buy, they hate to be sold, and people buy for their reasons, not yours. And we need to keep that in mind as salespeople. And we
might talk about that in the closing section.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah. So stay tuned for more.
That ties right into that.
And then the last thing that I want to add, which I think is really important, is what are you listening to and what are you listening with? And they talked about body language, about picking up people's tone when you're listening to them on the phone, body language and tone with Zoom calls or Teams calls or, video chats is also very influential. And if you can do that, usually in the beginning of a relationship, it's easier to build trust and rapport, and you don't always have to do that every single time that you meet. Kind of like meeting a person in person for the first time. I like to go to a company, if I'm going to be doing a virtual program, and go to their company, go on site, meet the people, see them, and then see them on the screen later. And it makes building that trust a lot quicker and a lot more accelerated when you're there in person.
Right.
But, another great chapter. Just what a great book, Bill. You picked up another good one.
That's been a very good book. So
next week, the title is What Great Salespeople Do, Chapter 9, Shifting the Herd at the Enterprise Sale. So that'll be the topic, one chapter.
Sounds like we're moving from the one-on-one to telling stories for a whole group.
Yeah. Committee
selling, committee buying.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent topic.
Yeah, it was.
So our other topic for today is secrets to closing the sale. I like the word secrets because it's, it's mysterious, but there are no real secrets to closing the sale. And I have 3 major areas that I want to talk about with closings, and none of them include ABC, always be closing, because I think you can close too early and you can annoy people by closing all the time. And I don't think you only get steak knives if you don't close every minute of every day. As a matter of fact, I think you can screw up your deal by trying to close too soon and cheapen what you have to offer because you don't know the whole story yet. And we're not selling an item to an individual. Most business to business salespeople are selling a concept. They're selling a long-term relationship. And so things have to happen. And so I think the first thing and the most important thing to closing the sale is having a logical sales process. Because a logical sales process, and this goes back to Neil Rackham's quote, when you're selling, your expertise becomes your enemy. Your expertise may make you right, but your buyer needs to move through the buy cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And the buy cycle is your logical selling process in tune with what the customer wants to do. And I've learned there's 5 things that they have to overcome before they can buy. And if your process doesn't get them through these 5 questions, then you're going to be in trouble. So why should I buy from your company? Is your product or service the right and best option? Will you or will your company be around to help me? Can I trust what you're telling me? And will you make this painless? And if you can't help them overcome those innate questions in themselves, and sometimes, can I trust you might go away because you get referred by somebody, and that happens. But you need to affirm that there is trust been built up. So what do you think about those 5 barriers or 5 questions, Scott?
I think they're great. I think when it comes to can I trust you, it can be very similar, but somewhat different is, do I feel safe to make a decision? Do I understand all of the risks and consequences that are part of making a change? And sometimes we don't know all of the different attributes when we do make a change, and it's separate than trusting. I think, another great question is, really understanding, why do I want to change now and not next week or last month or next month?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that gets into your question 5 of, will you make this painless?
All right.
Which is part of the motivation and the process of, and protecting a person's dignity too, because if they're responsible for making a decision and other people are watching them, you want to make sure that your champion is always a hero and always protect their dignity.
Right.
When they are changing something. So it's a great list.
So the selling process for me, and I think this is a real common selling process, you've got business development. You're always trying to find new customers. When you do have somebody that is interested, you start your discovery process, which can include stories and questions and the whole thing that we're talking about here. And it can be counselor selling. It can be the spin selling. So whatever is giving you the good discovery, but good questions, proposing some sort of a solution, and then negotiate and close the deal. So if you're not taking them through that in some logical order, I think the close can come at an inappropriate time. You'll start closing all the time because you don't know when a good close is. You don't know when you should close. And so that's my number 1. Follow a logical sales process that does 2 things. It has a process. And number 2, it overcomes the questions and the barriers that the customer is going to have. And you want to overcome those early. You don't want them to come at the end of the meeting where they go, well, we've talked back and forth for 3 different meetings now, but I'm not sure I can trust you. What?
Yikes.
Yeah.
Right.
We're way down the road and you didn't find out whether you were building that or not. So,
yeah. And sometimes the questions that you ask and the process that you follow can increase your credibility and build trust, because your prospect is going through a process maybe that they're unfamiliar with, and they need to feel safe making a change. And if you're not delivering a system and delivering expectations, then their guard is up. And when their guard is up, they're constantly wondering where, the other shoe is going to drop, or
right,
what other things they're going to be set up for. And they don't want to do that. They want to be vulnerable, and they want somebody to be able to help them. And I use that word intentionally, change something so that they have a better life and better results.
Well, I agree. But I think their guard is up from the moment you start.
Definitely.
And your goal is to build that trust and build that relationship, that professional relationship, so that guard starts to go down and they will start to tell you the truth. And you and I have talked about this before, Scott. Mm-hmm. If this is amazing to you folks, you haven't sold very long, sometimes your prospect will lie to you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that might happen. That might happen. Oh. Be careful out there, because they might be telling you that, like, things like, oh yeah, I'll be making this decision.
Hmm.
That can be a lie sometimes.
Right.
Well, we don't have a budget for this. That can be a
Oh.
lie for it. Or our budget's only X for this. So they're going to try and control their side of the conversation, and uh, they just need to be ready for it. And you build that trust. I think you build a lot of it through discovery.
Yeah,
Discovery. I
definitely.
think a lot of salespeople think you build trust through telling,
Hmm.
and I disagree. You build trust through asking good questions, and as this book we're going through, what great salespeople do, telling stories that then reveal personal things about you and builds that relationship as well. Okay,
Hmm.
the second thing that I think you need to do, you do need to be ready to close at any time. So you need to be listening. I tell the story. I had a friend, Kenny, that I used to work with, and Kenny was a great guy, but he wouldn't ever stop talking. And so
Hmm.
Kenny would talk him into it, talk him out of it, talk him into it, talk him out of it, talk. And wherever he finally stopped talking, whether they were in or out, that's where they were. And so you do have to look for things where the customer, the prospect is ready to go ahead and buy. The questions have been answered, and sometimes you can screw things up by adding a lot more information. So some things that I do to change the conversation that gives me the opportunity to listen better for that close. One, I want to give them ownership. If I'm going to do a training and consulting process, it's not my training and consulting process, it's theirs. And so I change ownership. This is their issue. I don't take this on for me. This is going to be their process. So I give them ownership. Number two, I give them control of the process. I'm always asking them, what do we need to do next? Where do we need to go next? Who else do we need to talk to? Who
Hmm.
else needs to improve this? What kind of information do you need to make you feel comfortable? So I'm asking a lot of questions about what their process is, what they need, and how we can help them get through that process. And then I like to give them choices. Do you want to go path A or path B? Do you want to see these, what sort of things do you want to see? They want to feel in control. The more you try to control that sales process overtly, the more trouble you're going to get into, because they're going to wrest control from you. So if you're able to give them some control, then they're going to feel that they've got more options and that they have more energy they can put into it because it's their choices. And now I'm not selling them something. As you say, Scott, they're making the decision to go ahead and buy it. But if I'm
Right.
pushing, I think about fishing, right? You just can't push that worm on the fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you
That's
throw it
true.
out there and you dangle it and then you kind of take it away a little at a time, the fish says, huh, maybe this is something I want. So pushing too hard for your close gets them, I think, to push away.
Right. I think another good example or similar to that is creating options. And when you create options, you're framing issues and you're creating the criteria that they have to choose from is when you
Mm,
frame the issue and give them options. And when I teach a negotiations class, I always say to the sales reps, are you creating options or are you picking from them? And you don't want to be in a position where you have to pick. You want to be in a position where you're creating options. And when you create options, they're most likely going to be advantageous to you versus another person who is just picking them.
right, right. Okay. And then finally, there's going to be a point sometimes where even though you've done everything right, they haven't said, okay, Bill, I'm ready to go, or where's the contract, or well, what do we need to do next? So uh, I call them questions and objections, and things that you need to know. First of all, questions are a buying sign. Questions are not a problem. The questions that are, how do we do this, or when can we get started, or what's your pricing, or all those are good signs. They're questions that then say that there's an interest there. And so don't get put off by questions. Be very careful how you answer them. Objections, on the other hand, are things that we need to deal with. Now, hopefully we dealt with some of them earlier, but the four major ones that I run into all the time, Scott, and maybe you have different ones. Price is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, I'm a negotiator at heart. I'll always be glad to give you 20% less for the same thing I'd pay full price for. So if you'll
Mm-hmm.
negotiate with me, I'm more than happy to negotiate. So I'll always bring up price as an issue to see what you do. But sometimes if you say, nope, I'm going to stick with the price, I'll buy it anyway.
Yeah.
But price comes up as an issue. It might be in terms of budget. It might be in terms of terms, loans, when we pay for it. All those different things can come up. But how much I'm going to pay for this in the long run is got to be dealt with. Timing can be a big objection. Do we do it now or do we do it in a month? Can you get the product to us in time? Can you get enough product to us in the right amount of time? Those are all timing objections that we might have. Or there might be objections that are, gee, I'm not ready to get this started right now. I think I'm losing a deal right now that I let them get away with putting me off long enough until it just died. And so I couldn't get them to get things going, and now I can't get them to call me back. So that was a timing objection that I wasn't able to overcome. Authority is an objection. That is, they told us they could sign on the dotted line, but now they need to bring their boss in, or they need to bring it, as you said, to the committee, right?
Yeah.
So authority, can I really do it? And then finally, delay. I want to think about it, right? And so having good questions around, what is it you need to think about, can be good. So any other objections that you find as being real common? Those are very broad brushes.
Yeah, they are. I think sometimes the competition with other unique selling propositions that another company has that you're not able to deliver for one reason or another can be an objection. In that case, this other company that you're competing against has really worked on decommoditizing their service or their value that they're offering and not making it easy to compare or shop. I think is a great way of positioning companies, but that can also be an objection. And sometimes an objection is just a prospect going silent too, and not even responding. I mean, is it called gaslighting now is a new term? I think it's what it's called that. How do you deal with silence? And that is very, very difficult to deal with silence. But,
yeah, I think that's, and I'm dealing with that with a prospective client right now. So, and it's very uncomfortable. So, it'll be a very powerful tool. Okay, let me finish up with some closes that I like. I do have some closes that I like to do. The number one I like to do is an assumptive close. I don't ask them if they're going to buy. I assume they're going to buy, and we start talking about when and how, and I get them into the detail questions. If they start saying, well, we can't start this in February, we're going to have to start it in March, the deal is done. Now we've got a few details that we have to work out. But if I assume what we're going to do, then we can just move past the close, which I like. Most people don't like to be closed. They don't like to make a decision, yes or no. But if they make a decision when, then we've skipped the yes or no, and that's going to happen. So I call that the assumptive close. I like the alternative choice. Do you want A or do you want B? Do you want to do it in February? Do you want to do it in March? Do you want to do the big program? Do you want to do the medium-sized program? Do you want to do it live or do you don't want to do it online? And those are all alternative choices, which if they choose one, both of which I'm happy with, they got the deal.
Yeah.
You've heard of the Ben Franklin close, I'm sure. Yep. The Ben Franklin close, for those of you who don't know, is where you put a sheet of the paper down in front of them, you put a T box on it, and on one side it says pro, on the other side it says con, and this is for people who can't make a decision. They really are stuck with, it sounds good, but I'm really worried about this. And I'll say, let me show you a tool that Ben Franklin always used to make decisions. I've initiated it, and I put this T out there and pro and con. I said, let's start writing down the things you don't like about what we're talking about or that you're worried about. Let's write the things that you think will be good. And if the pro list is bigger, we might as well just go for it. And that works really well. And then the last one is one I know we've talked about before. This is for the people who I just can't get them to make a decision. We've done everything. I might say, Scott, it sounds like you want to tell me no.
Yeah. Go for it.
And if they say, well, Bill, yeah, I do want to tell you no. I just feel bad. And say, hey, that's okay. You can tell me no. Or if they say, well, no, I don't want to tell you no. I'll say, Scott, the only other choice is yes. So let's figure out how we need to get there. I mean, there's only yes or no. There's not, let's wait for another 6 months. We're at this no or yes point. So it's fish or cut bait, right? This is the old way of saying it. So those are closes I like that I don't have 50 of them. Like, Zig
Ziglar.
No, Zig's not a big, is he a big close guy? I'm thinking
He's got
Tom Hopkins.
Oh, Tommy Hopkins.
Tom
Yeah.
Hopkins is about an 80 close guy. So
Yeah.
have 80, have more closes than they have no's. Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I
so
thought
that's
of that. Yeah,
Quentin. No. All right. So that's really just sums it up. So have a logical sales process, deal with their issues, be ready to close at any time. And then when they hesitate, have some good closes that you're ready to use.
Right. I think the takeaway close is another one that's very similar to the tell me no, is you just say, I get the impression that this is not something that you want to do today. And like, no, that's not the case. Just this. So very similar to that. And sometimes another close is you're dealing with somebody and you don't want to work with them. You've gone through the whole discovery process and you're like, this is not a perfect fit. This is a misfit. And I don't want to work with them. So you kind of pull out the rate card and it's full rate. And you say, here's a way for us to work together. Is this, or this, and this. And those are the options that we have. Do you see anything there that you like, or is it just going to pass?
That's the anti-close. That's I'd rather get out of here with nothing than work with you.
Right. But I want them to be able to come to that decision where they have to say no. And when they say no, they're losing something. If you do a good job of discovery and presentation, you're painting a picture in the prospect's mind of a better life. And when they go through this whole decision-making process and they have to say no to you, they're giving up what they saw as possible. It's like test driving a new car. And we all know why we don't test drive a new car, because as soon as we do, we're going to be buying it.
Yeah.
And it's too soon to do that right now.
All right. So that's a wrap for today. I do have a resource I want to offer, and that is I am doing a workshop called The 7 Deadly Sins of Selling. I do a presentation. I'll do it for 4 companies that contact me. 45 minutes long. If you're in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, I'll do it live for you. If you're further away, we'll do a webcast. But get your sales team together and get somebody new in front of them with new ideas, and I'd be happy to do that.
Great option. And what have you got to lose for taking Bill up on the option? So consider that. Our golden nugget today is, if we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame cannot survive. By Brene Brown, one of your favorite authors, Bill.
Yeah,
I know that.
Yeah,
well.
I don't have
listening.
Yeah, shame. She likes to be shaming. She likes to overcome shame. I don't have any shame, so she doesn't really affect me very much.
Relevant, huh?
I maybe everybody in the world grew up with a lot of shame, but I just, I grew up like pretty oblivious to the world, so. I have a very bad memory about things, so I don't remember things.
That's an advantage. Let's hope it doesn't become a medical condition.
I'm sorry, Steve. What'd you say?
Yeah, exactly. It won't be long now, folks.
All right.
For a new co-host.
Go to winningatselling.com, get these resources, get this information, look at our show page. All this information's in the show notes, so look for it there.
Next week, Chapter 9, Shifting the Herd, the Enterprise Sale. And the topic is going to be stop focusing on the customer funnel.
Please subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues on your social media pages. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.